Welcome back. My
Hey,
name is Ashley, and this is the Black Sheep Christian Podcast. Today, I am with personal coach Tonya Peck. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
hello. Thank you for having me.
We have had some interesting tech issues because, that's just life. So, if you would be like, why they look so surprised that something is happening, it's because the struggle is real.
That's right. Exactly. You're just rolling with it.
Oh, so thanks for joining me. I really appreciate your um, for the views, she reached out to me. And when I read this on your website, emotionandmindset.com, I was like, yeah, it shouldn't have been a paragraph. It should have been a check the box, check that box. And
Um,
so it was, I know what it's like to feel stuck,
mm,
trapped by shame, weighed down by self doubt, and held back by insecurity. Maybe you've tried pushing through on your own, only to find yourself facing the same struggles over and over again.
mm.
And so I felt that this was a really great conversation to have. Like what I said, I feel like I felt like I should have been more like, does this speak to you? Check this box. And I was like, oh, self doubt. Yep. Shame. Yep. That's me. Insecurity. Yep. That's me there too.
Yes, I'm unfortunately, I feel like it's probably a lot of people's experience, trying to work through some of those things. So I'm glad that we were able to visit today.
Yeah. So tell me, um, my brain just went flat as far as starting this journey, as far as being a personal coach, just based off of that
Mhm.
paragraph.
Sure. It kind of started in the beginning, I guess I would say. Came from a broken home. My mom was married and divorced several times. And, just that environment, especially back in the 70s, brought about a lot of shame, in our
Yeah.
family. And spiritually, it wasn't, it's just not something that really happened a lot. And so I feel like we were kind of looked at. With a big question mark, kind of like what's going on there and why is this happening, in that area? And finding in that space where maybe I was questioning a wanting or a loving from, a male father figure, maybe from other people in, our family, just kind of really searching and looking for that wanting and that love, maybe in unhealthy ways as I started to grow older. And it took place in regards of like physical relationships and unhealthy behaviors that, again, now as an adult looking back, your kid logic, you're just trying to fill a need and you're not really sure why you're doing the things you're doing, but you're just trying to feel that hole, and the faith was, I guess, not really a strong part of our family growing up. We did the obligatory Christmas, Easter, those types of things. So I didn't really have much of a knowledge of God or what that looked like. And so I just kind of searched and connected the dots in the way that I felt I needed. And eventually I did. Some situations led us to go to church where I did find a youth group that was definitely like loving and accepting and had that belonging without, having me have to offer something, if you will. But then again, kind of just human nature, the enemy, kind of spoke to my heart in a way that I started searching again. And that resulted then back into those unhealthy physical relationships. And as a senior in high school, I had an unplanned pregnancy. And being in that environment, where I was in a Christian school and I was looked at as a leader, and having kind of that all crumble, in a sense, and disappointing not just myself, but disappointing, my grandparents and those around me that I felt, believed in me. And that is where I guess kind of the initial shame, piece came. And as I've gotten older, I can look back at that and say, I'm not a bad person. I wasn't a bad person. I made a wrong choice. But in that environment, it was definitely more like, don't say anything. For the school, especially, that there's optics involved. We want to be seen as, someone that upholds faith and, all the principles. And so from that feeling, I didn't tell anyone, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to graduate. Thankfully, I was only a couple months away. And in the past, whenever, I was starting to get involved in church, I think because of my background, there were people that pretty much said to, like people I was seeing, she's a bad risk. She came from a broken home. She probably won't be someone that will be married, to one person for the rest of their lives. So I think just unfortunately the stigma of coming up in some of those family backgrounds where there has been, whether it be a divorce or whether there be mental health issues or, alcoholism, abuse, all those things that, that tends to either stick with you or stick with kind of your story. And you carry that, as you go forward. So unfortunately with the unplanned pregnancy, everything, kind of blew up, if you will. And then I had a miscarriage about 4 months later. So there again, we kind of went through all of that. Then I was sitting there in the hospital just thinking, what was that for? And now as an adult, I can see that those situations that led me to that point was really just me searching for an unmet need of feeling that wanting and loving and feeling that is what love meant, which of course, as an adult, we know that now that's not true love, but in your teenage years, you're just grasping for straws. So I felt for those really after that experience, I did share with, close, obviously family, but then my now husband, which thankfully for anyone watching, your past does not dictate your future because we've been married for 35 years this August. So I think those situations you can definitely use as your reason to stay stuck and, kind of continue those maybe negative, thoughts or habits or, kind of a fatal flaw, or it can be your reason to do better. To learn from them, to take the things that you saw maybe in childhood that you didn't love and leave that behind, but then build on all the positive things that were there as well. So after that situation, when I was a senior, then moved forward and we did attend church and we started to get more involved. But the shame that I felt from that experience, really not being able to share or feeling like if someone knew that about me, that I would not be accepted and they would see me differently. And so I really kind of hid under that shame and doubt and guilt of that one experience for 10 years. And I feel bad saying how long, because, looking back, I'm 55 now, and that happened, when I was 18, and thinking, how did it take me 10 years to feel confident and brave enough to share that with a couple close girlfriends? And their response was, of course, one of empathy and forgiveness, and shared some experiences that they had that were similar but different. And it just started to open up that door to release that heaviness and that guilt and that shame and start really living into who God intended for me to be, all along. But I think the enemy, gets in that space and, knows what to say or what to present to us in our minds to keep us small and to keep us doubting and keep us scared. And just really taking that very first step to move out of that space and have the confidence to trust in someone that is safe and hopefully, then is loving and accepting in your story and allows you to be human and to empathize and find that growth is still possible. And there's a lot of amazing ways that this story, after, talking to those close girlfriends and having that conversation, then allowed me to see what my gifts were personally and how I could lean into that in a bigger way. And I went into healthcare. And I was in healthcare for about 15 years. And again, just kind of maximize the potential that I had there and started thinking about my life experiences and the things that I went through in childhood that led me to the, teenage years that led me to, more awareness as an adult. And the more I started to kind of have conversations with women that were grown adults, they started to share their stories too of things that they experienced. And we're still really not confident to share those in light of being nervous about being judged, or not being seen for who they really were, or maybe feeling in some way that people would think it was their fault. And so then that just kind of opened the doors and to just look at what impact could I provide in a larger way. I have been in health and fitness for the last 10, 15 years, and that's been great. And so I've enjoyed impacting people in that way. But as it's kind of evolved into more the story of making a mistake and not feeling like I deserved the forgiveness, that God freely gives, but knowing it and accepting it are different. And so coming to that realization and hopefully be able to be that bridge builder for those other women, whatever age, whatever background, whatever experiences are, be that there is healing. And, again, their past isn't their present, and it definitely doesn't have to be their future.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Thank you.
I have a family member whose story is similar in ways. Um, Not the teen pregnancy or the divorces. It was actually a death in the family, which resulted in a parent remarrying.
Okay.
And when they remarried, that's when the change of the dynamic happened.
Mm,
And so when I hear your story, I hear similarities to what they went through, and I find it quite extraordinary, um, hearing your story and knowing their story, how you persevered through that,
mm,
through the abuse, through the neglect, because it doesn't really fully say it in your story, as far as what I read,
sure.
but to be a child that's neglected
Mhm,
in any form of capacity, and to be able to be where you're at today is extraordinary. So I just want
mhm,
to acknowledge that, that your story is beautiful, and
mhm.
I'm just in awe of what you went through.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. It means a lot.
You're welcome. As far as there's some nuggets in there, and my question is, because the person that I'm thinking about, they had their angel.
Okay.
And their angel, I would describe it as their angel was not in the home,
Mhm.
but was aware of what was going on in the home,
Okay.
and advocated in interesting ways
Mm,
for them. Who was your angel to
mm.
pull to help let you know that they were there for you?
That's a really great question. Gosh, that's really good. I would say my grandparents.
Mm,
My grandparents were just very stable, solid, caring, loving people. They didn't live in our town,
mm,
but I think they were a source of security for me whenever we were there. And I think they were instrumental in just providing some sort of foundation,
yeah,
that was unchanged. And even though, sometimes the parent child, like my mom has a very different relationship, or did, they pass now with them. And I think she would see things a lot differently. But the benefit of like grandparents and grandchildren is that you kind of have the opportunity to kind of reset maybe some of those relationships and those things that maybe weren't done, initially.
yeah,
So I held them in very high regard. So I guess from a distance, I would say my grandparents were very safe for me. And in closer proximity, there was a neighbor. Her name was Rosemary in one of our neighborhoods, and then we moved to a different neighborhood in Chris. And they were ladies that were mother figures,
yeah,
and I had an open door. I could come over anytime. They would make lunch for me. Sometimes if my mom maybe wasn't well, or she had some physical issues as well as mental issues at times. And so I think that they just made sure that I felt like I had someone,
yeah,
and I could come to them. And really, I don't recall it being a major need, but just for I guess I would say the small things, which may be food and
yeah,
care and hugs and compassion are actually big things. But at the time, it was amazing. And I had a lot of health issues in terms of asthma. So I remember this Rosemary specifically like helping, like took me to the hospital, one night when I was having an asthma attack. And so they were very present and a part of my life, and just being there, as a constant.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. That reminds me of their story when you say asthma, because I remember the family member, they were sick and went to school. I think it was the
Mhm.
flu.
Oh, okay.
And so they scolded the parent, why are you allowing your
Mhm.
child to be sick? And they're like, we didn't know. And a teacher would allow them to sleep sometimes,
Oh.
had a space for them to sleep in order to get rest. And this was outside of
Mhm.
them being sick sometime. So
Right.
when you mention Rosemary, right? Was that her name?
Yes. Yeah, Rosaria.
She was taking care of your asthma. I think that's really beautiful, and it also for those really is a testament because these days, I mean, back then things were different.
Hmm.
Clearly,
Right.
um, when they talk about their story, I'll be like, well, I'm a mandatory reporter. You know, being
Mhm.
in an educational system, I would have to
Right.
call.
Yes. Yes,
Even though the
exactly.
teacher provided rest,
Sure,
today,
sure.
we would have to call and,
Yeah.
get the state involved. But to be able to remind people, sometimes we don't need to do big things
Mhm.
because as a child,
Yeah.
adults who are not in the home can only do so much. And
Right.
so to be able to provide someone with rest or food can just be enough for them to get to a point where somebody who can get
Mhm.
them out of the home or until they become 18 for some,
Mhm.
to be able to escape fully until that true rescue comes. Because sometimes some of us aren't equipped to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a great reminder.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing your story. That's beautiful.
Absolutely.
I don't know why I'm just so thinking about that. I'm just
Mhm.
digesting it.
Mhm.
So, moving on to your personal coaching with your, you have a questionnaire of the 7 prime
Mm.
questions, which
Yeah.
I find very interesting and engaging. Because when I look at
Right?
this, hate surprises, it depends.
Uh-huh.
Even I was like, it depends on the type of surprise. Now, if it's a surprise party, oh, I'm so down with it. You
Sure.
know, car repair, that's a different type of surprise.
Exactly. 100%. Yes, you are right. There's lots of varieties of as it comes to like those things, surprises especially.
So, with those questions, I'm believing that it's really starting to get to the root of
Mhm.
what is causing the holdback.
Absolutely. Yes. I think people are used to dealing with behaviors, when they come to a counselor or a coach. And I think society in general, or maybe even our families of origin, they're like, here's a list of do's and don'ts. Like don't eat too much, do exercise, like don't have too much TV, but do be aware of social events. Like there's just all these like do's and don'ts and behaviors that are socially acceptable and behaviors that aren't. And we can change our behavior but only for so long. I feel like then there are, it's a bad day or there's a trigger or there's, it's just something that sets us off. And then, maybe we've been able to, let's say in the fitness, perspective, eat good, whatever that means. And then we just have a bad day and we just went off the rails and ate a whole pan of brownies, and now it's like, okay, well, behavior, there was a, like you said, there was a cause. There was a reason that we ate those brownies. And
Yeah,
not to say
brownies are
that brownies
good.
aren't amazing. Exactly. And some days we just need to dig in and, embrace whatever it is. But as a whole and as a person and someone looking for growth, um, and it really is a God thing because of my coaching and in embracing the fitness aspect and then kind of looking at those that I was working with as someone that wanted to improve physically or mentally or improve their eating habits. Sometimes they would continue to have the same kind of come up against the same walls. And
Yeah.
so it just kind of makes you question, like, okay, like we're trying different things, the desire is there, like what is underneath, the thing underneath the thing that is, keeping them stuck from moving forward. And so I was scrolling one night and Mike Foster, kind of came across the screen, and he was talking about these primal needs. And so I'm like, and it's a quiz. So, who doesn't love a quiz? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to check that out. And then he was starting a coaching certification program kind of around this framework. So it's based on years of research that he was doing as a coach. And again, kind of like trying to connect the dots to how to help people best and where they were. And so he kind of designed this framework that, again, I feel like definitely helped me in my growth journey. And there's 7 primal needs. So it's the framework is that we all have kind of one dominant need that we connected the dots with in childhood. Again, no blame whatsoever on our parents, on, how they did or didn't do things, because, as a parent myself, I know some of those years I look back and we were probably in survival mode because, I was working and the kids had school and there was homework and there was soccer and there was, you're just trying to keep everybody moving forward. And sometimes the things, as a child you're looking to as connecting the dots may or may not have been truth, but that's how we perceived it. And in my experience with coaching, sometimes it's not the parents that helped kind of create that need or question that need. It was like maybe an outsider that did harm, to someone. And so because of that, then their feeling of safety, is the utmost of importance. So the 7 needs are safety, which, just people that are innately need that safetiness. And if they don't feel safe, then they kind of start to be more hyper aware, like start mentally thinking, okay, now what do I need to do? Are the doors locked? Is this relationship secure? Like kind of in overdrive, I would say, for if your main need is being safe, but you're not feeling safe. So the whole premise of the questions, which they're, am I safe? Am I secure? Which is a little bit more about financial security and the importance of that. The question number 3 is, am I loved? Question 4 is, am I wanted? Question 5 is, am I successful? Question 6 is, am I good enough? And question 7 is, do I have purpose? And so from those basic needs, which again, it's an art, not a science, we can all change and evolve. And so when you take that quiz, there's kind of something that kind of leads you to be more concerned about a specific need than another. And again, it's not right or wrong. It's just how we were created. And anytime that we get a yes to our question, so for me, am I wanted? When I'm feeling loved and wanted, I'm like my best self. I'm feeling confident. I'm feeling sure about things. I'm feeling, just at peace internally. But then when we're in those environments or relationships or job situations or church situations where that basic need that we rely on is being answered in a no or a maybe, then that's when we tend to lean into those unhealthy behaviors, whether it be, physically, in relationships, whether it be just buying a bunch of stuff, whether it's overthinking, perfectionism, just the behaviors that we kind of try to do to make those there's those no or maybes situations turn into a yes. So for example, for the am I wanted, as a spin instructor, and in a workshop I was explaining this, and to the outsider you're just like, what? But so you're at spin, like let's say the room is full of people, like we're having fun, music is going, like everybody's getting their sweat on, like I'm feeling like I'm in my sweet spot, and then someone gets up and, like, let's say it's class isn't over, but they get up and they leave. Yeah. So instead of me kind of focusing on like, oh, there's still a room full of people, I'm still in my sweet spot, like I hyper focus on that one person that left. And so when that happens, then internally I'm thinking, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not wanted, and so then my mind, instead of again enjoying, then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like maybe my music was too loud. Maybe I wasn't playing the right music. Maybe she, likes rap and I was playing pop, or, I don't know, just all these weird narratives that we start making up to connect the dots. And for all I know, she could have had a doctor's appointment, so it's just being aware of those moments where you are feeling confident and your needs are being met, but then one little thought or one little, situation like that happens, where then you start to go into overdrive and start questioning your ability and questioning, your confidence, and being aware of that. Where in my earlier example, like it doesn't take 10 darn years, to be like, oh yeah, I am wanted and loved. I don't need to stay under a rock questioning that. Like it can happen in a moment to be like, oh wait, this is truth. I am wanted, instead of questioning, am I? And so that's kind of where the learning and the journey, happens, is just creating more awareness to those thoughts and actions to limit, the spiral when we do feel like our needs are not being met. So that's kind of the overarching, is like, if your needs are being met, you're doing great. If there's something that comes along that starts to question that, then we start to kind of compensate with behaviors that may not be serving.
Yeah. Mm. You were saying the 10 years, which I relate to,
Mhm.
based off of my life and trauma. And it almost seems, I had this image in my mind that it almost seems as if it took 10 years just for the dust to settle.
Mhm.
It's almost like as if a hurricane or a dust storm happened and I am not seeing clearly. I'm not processing any information clearly because
Right.
things are just everywhere. And once that dust settles, it's kind of like, oh, it's not too bad.
Yeah,
I just need to I
exactly.
just need to clean up a bit.
Right, right. That's true. Yes.
But being on the other side of things, because I know somebody who's going through a traumatic event in their life,
Okay.
as far as a divorce. Like a divorce
Yeah.
is a death,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
so there's concern about how people are handling. There's concern from other people on how they're handling it. And my thing is, sometimes we just need the dust to settle,
Yeah.
because we can say all that we want to say to a person, but
Right.
they just got to see it.
Mhm.
And I think for me, it took 10 years
Mhm.
because I wasn't able to see it until the end.
Gotcha.
And so I find it interesting with your questions, even with 7 questions is, um, even though you think, oh, that's short, but how the questions are worded, it really takes you some pause to have that dust to settle and really see, like, do I hate surprises?
Mhm.
Avoiding activities. Now, it didn't take 10 years for me to understand avoid activities.
Sure, sure. Exactly. Yes.
I knew
Some
that right away. I remember I remember my daughter was well graduated in band, and so they did band camp, and then families could see their work, and they every
Yes.
year they have the alumni go on the field and run, and so I was convinced to go and run, and my mom was like, "That's the first time I've ever seen you run." I don't.
Oh, that's
that
fun.
that was me avoiding physical activity at
There
all.
you go, right? The things we'll do for our kids that we would never do otherwise. That's a true testament to being an amazing parent, right?
Isn't it?
Yes.
Isn't it? And as far as a testament to being an amazing parent, it's funny because I don't know for you, but for me, um, not only being a parent, but being a parent to a teenager
Mhm.
who becomes an adult really is a mind shift,
Yeah,
because from baby to toddler years is really about survival. Like, these
exactly.
things are so small, but we're so terrified. Are they
Right.
burping? Are they pooping?
Yep.
Why are they moving like that?
Right, right. Yes. Are they
And
gaining weight?
you're like, yay, I can't wait for them to walk. And then you'd be like, I need for
Exactly.
them to sit.
Absolutely.
But even afterwards, like when they become, especially when they become an adult,
Mhm,
for me, that's when it's kind of like, I know who I am,
mhm,
my boundaries, what I'm
mhm,
capable of leading this person, that God gave. And I don't know about for you, but I'm trying to tie it with your questions at the same time. But with these
mhm,
questions,
mhm,
it really is a moment to be able to understand who you are,
mhm.
especially in your time of life.
Right.
'Cause you did say that it really does. You do shift and move almost like a wave.
Mhm.
Because I loved the the imaginative years. Baby years was boring, even though
Yeah.
it was stressful. It was just boring. It was like
Yes.
this body's just like
Just carry it from point A to point B. It's like, all right, now what?
with other stuff. It
Yeah,
really was the stuff I
yeah,
hated.
you're right. Yep,
It wasn't the baby. I just
right,
want to make that
right.
clear.
100%. You're so right.
The bag, the stroller, the what
Mhm.
ifs.
Yes, the what ifs, yes. Pacifiers, you gotta have, like, not just one, because what if that one, like, gets lost? You gotta have another one. So it's not even just thinking about what you need, but, like, ahead of that even, like, if that's not there, we need to have a backup in all these areas, so
Right. And then if the baby would cry, in the space, is where, people would expect for the parent to leave.
yeah,
But for me, it was just like, I can leave with this baby, but this
right.
stuff,
Yes. That's
you'd be
so
like,
true.
let me let me grab
Exactly.
this and leave.
Exactly.
Oh gosh.
That's
But
funny.
anyways, so to my next question, as
Mhm,
far as with these, after these questions, and going through these questions,
mhm.
what should a person who's coming to you for personal coaching, what is the next step? What should they expect, or for those who hate surprises, what
Sure,
should
yes. Yes.
what are they going to receive after they fill out this questionnaire?
Mm. So for those that fill out the questionnaire, then I get their survey. I kind of go through it, score it, if you will. And then we usually have a discovery call, which is free. And it's just kind of going through the questions, seeing if the way that they answered and the way that those questions kind of lend to, if that makes sense for them. Sometimes there's more than one question that they feel kind of drawn to. So again, just asking more clarifying questions, getting a little bit more information about their history in terms of what was it like growing up, what things do you love, what things really cause you just angst, if you will. And so really identifying those things and then talking through what they're interested in, I would say, moving forward in. So sometimes with this awareness, maybe there's a relationship that they're feeling stuck in, or the physical situation where maybe they want to improve something physically and that's just they keep hitting a wall. Maybe it's through work environment. There's opportunities and challenges that they would like to explore, but they don't feel confident enough to do so. So I think just looking at where they're at, what areas they either feel stuck in or areas they would like to explore, and then doing a deeper dive in their primal question and kind of being able to identify what they need most. Are they getting that? Are they not? What maybe types of unhealthy behaviors are resulting, from not getting those needs met?
Mm,
Where are they feeling confident? Because the goal then is to the more healthy we become and the more aware we become about, what meets our needs, the more we can step into our gifts.
right.
Gifts that God given gifts and gifts that we can speak into others to provide that love, in my example, and oneness. Because the thing that we need most is the thing that we give best.
Mm,
And so in this work, sometimes I have a friend and she's like an am I safe, secure? And she's really drilled that into her kids. And she kind of felt bad, like, oh my gosh, like I've wrecked my kids. Like, they're checking their bank accounts and they're doing all these things like, kind of as a security measure. But I was like, yeah, but you at the same time, you gave them an amazing gift of having that awareness and having, that
mm,
practicality. And so I think that's the full circle moment, is when we can really step into who we are as people and who God intended us to be, and feeling confident and to do that. And then the way that we not only impact our relationships and our choices, but also how we impact those around us,
yeah.
and give them the freedom to be who they are, through that acceptance and that just support, whatever that looks like. So it's definitely, this isn't something that I pursued necessarily for, my marriage. But there were definitely blind spots, in that relationship, that through kind of going through this work, you're like, oh my gosh, like how much better could it be, if we looked at each other and really were focused on making sure the needs of that other person is met.
Mm,
How can I not give, I don't know, let's see how I say this. How can I not give them ammo to have unhealthy behaviors? You know what I mean? So like, for example, like my husband is, am I safe? And he is security minded. He likes to feel safe in his relationships, feel safe in his environment. And, I am the wanted. So again, like if I'm just going crazy and doing my thing and not affirming him and not reassuring him and making time for him, which is what he needs, then he's thinking, oh my gosh, like, is something wrong? Is she mad at me? Am I not doing enough for my relationship? Like, well, is our marriage, going the wrong direction? And all these thoughts that, again, are not real. It's just kind of dialogue that we start to create in our minds without really any proof. But the more that I can be aware of some of those, and again, not that you're not going to have, challenges or miscommunications, but if I cannot feed into those insecurities, then that's an amazing gift, to be more aware of what he needs, to be as good as he can be in terms of a husband, a dad, a grandparent, a leader, in the church and at work. So it kind of is an amazing gift to be able to give to others, but it's kind of like, you can't help others until you put that oxygen mask on yourself. So as much as I feel like in these needs in the workshop that we've started to do, there's a few that are involved that are just like, you know what, like, I've never thought about my needs. She was in kind of a similar home situation where it was always about everyone else. It was about kind of navigating the next thing. And she relied on, like, her to-do list, to provide value. And she never really had a need because she, I think, was self-protecting herself. It's like, if I don't have a need and I don't expect anything from anybody, then I can't be disappointed. And so even some of that awareness that we're like, oh my gosh, like, how can we, kind of function in that way? And it's worked for us. Clearly it's not that it hasn't, but what if we could take it to the next level and really, be more aware to grow, even more in a healthier way, I would say.
Wow. There's a couple of things that you said.
Yeah.
That made me want to go deeper, which is, man, I'm trying to figure out where to start.
That's all right. Take your time. I'm gonna grab it.
Because you had some really good things. Okay, so going back, which was the one with the friend who was drilling something in her kids about the financial security. And what I find interesting about that story is that it reminds me that God uses everything for his benefit, and for you to say that, because there are things that I think about as a parent. I'd be like, well, I should have done that better. I should have done this better. And I remember when my daughter was just clearly well into her teens. I remember it was road rage. Clearly road rage. And I was like, I told her, I said, don't be like me. And she goes, don't worry, I won't. So just don't be like me. But for you to share that story, I think it's beautiful, because it's hard not to regret. And I say that because a lot of things are digital. So, you might have a picture that will come up, because Apple is very notorious for this.
Yes, back to the technology.
And there are times where, the picture is beautiful. You kept the picture for a reason, but sometimes it can remind you of that particular day. Like, oh, before I took this picture, this is what was, there's surroundings. And sometimes it's hard not to regret.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. I definitely have, I'm sure, several instances, where I look back and wish that I would have said something different or acted differently. Then again, I guess it's just kind of, hopefully, we meant it from a good place, or we, didn't intend, how we reviewed it, and it just can give us grace, for just trying our best, even though we may not have always hit the mark, but being kind to ourselves in those moments.
Yeah. There was something else that you said that was intriguing, which was the example of you and your husband, as far as the different needs that you guys have in order to be fulfilled. I'll use that word. I don't know if that's the appropriate word.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
But I find that very interesting because we do get in our head quite easily.
Hmm.
Because, as the example, you were doing your thing, and you can go so far to where he begins to think other thoughts.
Right.
And when a partner begins to think other thoughts,
Mhm.
how how do you pull that back in as a couple?
Hmm. In terms of the person, I guess I need a little more context. So, like, let's say
Oh, okay.
for my husband, like, let's say if he was having, kind of reading into the situation
Right.
in
Yeah.
an abnormal way, um, hopefully through some of this, rather than, him finding compassion from the neighbor,
Mm,
or, at a work relationship, starting to talk to that person more about what's going on in terms of feelings, thoughts, like let's have, lunch, and feeling distant from me. And so is trying to find a connection, somewhere else. I think just keeping that openness and that dialogue open of, where, when that disconnect starts to happen, like, where's it coming from? Like, why is it happening? What, and again, not that we do something wrong, but maybe we're just not aware of what that person is needing in that moment in time. And so just being open and honest and willing to learn and grow, with your spouse. And like you mentioned, it's, we change and evolve. And I think there was definitely a time when he was pursuing the corporate track and was like, gone a lot. And then I maybe, didn't feel as seen or as pursued in those moments. And it wasn't because he didn't maybe want to, he just didn't have the bandwidth to.
yeah.
And I'm not giving him a pass, because let's say if we would have had more of this awareness to be like, okay, let's plan a date night. Like maybe he could, be more proactive about, I'm coming home from a long weekend. I'm going to bring flowers, because then that's going to tell, my spouse that they are being thought of, and that, they were missed. And so things like that. But then as we've gotten older, he had back surgery, and he's now not working and is kind of dealing with a lot of physical challenges, which then I think as life has shifted, he's
Yeah.
a little bit more aware of the things that he needs, because he has more time on his hands and he's not as busy with the day to day and then meetings and those types of things. So I think just really being willing to give each other grace and keep that communication, because I think as soon as those walls start to go up, it becomes harder
Yeah.
to figure out how to undo it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I think just learning and growing. And I don't know, we've, again, not done everything perfect by any means, but just giving each other grace to be the people that we are, and to embrace those changes when they happen, and to talk through them, and hopefully be supportive and not critical, and not judgmental, but just to try to be a partner in that.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. Did you ever end up having a conversation with your mom with what you went through?
Mm. In respect to like the primal question kind of things.
Oh, I was just thinking because, with communicating and grace,
Yeah.
it made me think about your mom.
Mm.